Today in the wood yard, we're going to deliver some wood. We're going to talk about wood volume and measurements coming up right now. It's winter time, so that means it's firewood time. And today we're going to talk a little bit about volumes of firewood, how you measure it, what they're called, things like that. The reason I'm bringing this up is it's probably the most commonly asked question that I get on my firewood channel. A lot of you cut wood, and a lot of you sell wood. Some of you just do it for yourself. Some of you do it is a hobby. But there's a lot of people that will ask questions that come onto the channel that are new to the channel. They just want to get some answers to questions they commonly have about wood and measurements and how you measure it. And they want to make sure that if they're buying wood, they're getting the correct amount. So today we're going to talk about it. So we're going to talk about how to measure it as far as height, width, length, weight, different words that are used in different countries. So that's what we're going to cover right now. So here we go. So the most common measurement for wood is what's called a cord. A lot of you know this. These are cords of wood. They are stacks that are 4 feet high, 4 feet wide, 8 feet long. And that total measurement is 128 cubic feet. So if you're going with meters, it's not the same. But that's what is used in the United States, and I think in Canada and some other parts of the world. This is the standard measurement. But some people in different countries, a lot of them, most of them actually, use the metric system. So the metric system is quite different. So we'll talk about that. But first, these piles, like I said, are all 4 feet high, 4 feet wide, and 8 feet long. And so that means that there is pieces in here that are 16 inches long, cut or split down to a smaller size that you can handle. So this wood has been processed, and it means that it's drying, and it'll take a year and a half for it to dry because this is oak, and then it'll be sold. Now, in each of these rows, each of these piles, I should say, there's 3 rows that are 16-inch pieces. So there's a row here, and a row here. So each one of those rows is considered a third of a cord, if you prefer that terminology, which is what is common. But in lots of the parts of the country, that is called a face cord. Now, a lot of people make comments on my channel. They're saying, how much is a face cord? Never heard of that before. What is that? Well, a face cord is one row of wood that is stacked, that is 4 feet high, 8 feet long, 16 inches, long pieces. Here's another pile. This is a full cord right here. And this is the pile that I'm going to take from today because I have a customer that wants one face cord or one row of this wood. So I'll be taking a third of a cord. That's what that'll equal. So that's what I'm going to sell. Now in Canada is pretty common terminology, and I think a few other countries too. A full cord is also called a bush cord. I had never heard of that until just a few years ago. But that's a pretty common name for a full cord of wood, a bush cord. So there's another name. Now another name that is used in certain parts of the United States and maybe some other countries too is how they refer to a third of a cord. A third of a cord in my part of the United States, I'm in Wisconsin, we call it a face cord because it's what you see on the face of a cord. It's just the one row. That's a face cord. It's also called a third of a cord. And in certain parts of the country, and I think it's down south for the majority, it's called a rick. R-I-C-K, a rick, is a third of a cord. So there's another measurement. Now, a cord is considered, I know in the United States and a lot of the actual states themselves, that is considered a legal definition, a cord of wood, because it's a term that can be used that's kind of uniform all the way across the United States, that everyone knows what it is. So that's a legal definition. A third of a cord is also a legal definition in most of the United States, and so is a face cord. So those are the differences. So if you don't know the difference between a face cord, a third of a cord, a full cord, it's pretty simple. So like I said before, one row is a face cord, one row is a third of a cord, 3 rows is a full cord. So that's what it looks like. So each of those rows is 8 feet long, 4 feet high. There you go. I'm going to talk about some more coming up. Now in this section of my wood yard, I have stacked what's considered softwood. This is pine, white pine. And white pine and red pine and jack pine and balsam, cedar, spruce is all considered softwoods. They are leafless trees. Well, they have leaves, they're needles, and they are evergreens. So that's what's considered softwoods. And any tree that loses its leaves, which are deciduous trees, is considered a hardwood. Some of you might not think that, but legally that's the definition. So even trees that are softer type of woods, like say popple or aspen or cottonwood, still considered a hardwood. Just the way it is, and it's like that in the paper industry primarily. That's the phrases they use for defining wood. So softwoods are your pines and your evergreens. So this wood is stacked in rows that are, they're big long rows I have here. Where I have this crisscross pattern, this is the start or end of one of the cords, and then here would be another cord going all the way down to here, and then it's 3 rows across. Now one cord, full cord that is, of softwood is going to weigh around 2,500 pounds. That's kind of like an average. It can weigh a little bit less, it can weigh a little bit more depending on how wet the wood is or how dry the wood is. And a full cord of hardwood can weigh on average right around 5,000 pounds, so almost twice as much. And what that means is when you're burning it, you're going to get twice as much heat out of it, because the BTUs that your wood puts out generally is dependent on the weight of the wood. So if you were to take a ton of white pine, a ton of it by weight, and a ton of red oak by weight, supposedly experiments have been done, I've read about it, you would get the same amount of BTUs out of it. But that ton of white pine might be, or should be, almost twice as big in volume wise as the oak, because oak is more dense, compact, tighter fiber wood, whereas your pines are more of a lighter grain. The wood structure, the fibers in it are actually, there's more air in it, there's more space. I don't know how to describe it, because I'm not a scientist. I'm just saying things that I've read, that's what they described, is that this wood has less fiber volume in it, as far as how tight the grains and the fibers are in the wood. So there's that part. So let's go over to a different pile now. So now I'm going to talk about pulp cords. And pulp cords, that is a term that is used in the logging industry and in the paper industry, because the logs that you see behind me here are all, this is all oak, it's all red oak, and these are all 100 inches long. And 100 inches long in this area, the Great Lakes area, I'm in Wisconsin, so pretty much in this area, 100 inches is a standard length for wood to be hauled, and wood that is used in paper mills. So that's kind of a standard that has been around for, I would say, well over 100 years. It's kind of a measurement that works well on trucks as far as hauling down the road, because they can load it actually horizontally on the bed of the trailer of the truck when they're hauling it. And 100 inches is just what they came up with. So it's not really 8 feet, it's 100 inches. So it's 8 feet, 4 inches. That's kind of the standard length that they're cut to. Now, if I was, and I did order these and I did buy this wood, it was brought in. If I was to order a cord of wood to be brought in, and this particular pile here, there's 2 of them. There's one just like this and one behind it. These 2 piles together are a complete truckload, and there is about 14 pulp cords in this pile. So a lot of people think, well, you're going to get 14 cords of wood out of that pile then when it's turned into firewood. And that is not the case, because the wood is not tight in these piles, as you can see, because the trees are not perfectly straight. You've got a lot of voids in here where there's open spaces. And when you cut the wood, obviously you're losing, I think it's like 3/8 of an inch or something like that for every saw cut. because the width of your saw chain, depending on what kind of saw you're using, what size the chain teeth are, you're going to have different widths for the cut. So when this wood is cut, split, and stacked, I'm just going to use an even number here. Say there was 10 pulp cords in this pile. So if there's 10 pulp cords, you would think you would end up with is 10 firewood cords or full cords. That is not going to happen because you're going to compact everything down into that pile by putting it together like you see these over here. So you're losing a lot of the voids that you have in spaces in the wood. You're going to have crooked pieces in the other pile. So this now is going to be much tighter because it's almost like sand that you would put into a jar. You'd get a lot more sand weight-wise into a jar than you would rocks because you're going to have voids with rocks when you try to put it into a jar. So when I cut these down, I generally end up with about 2.5 face cords to a full cord. So that means that it's less than a cord by, what would that be, 1/6? Yeah, it'd be 1/6. Because there's 3 face cords or 3 1/3 cords into a cord. So you're losing a little bit. So that's generally what I find. Some people say it's 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 is about what you end up with, plus or minus. So you actually end up with fewer face cords than what you think you would, or 1/3 of a cords. So there you go, there's that. Now another measurement a term you'll hear fairly often is boiler wood. And boiler wood is a term that's used by people that cut and burn wood in their homes for heating. If they have an outdoor boiler generally is what you'll see that they have. And those are fire boxes that are outdoor that they burn because they don't burn it in their house. It's heated with hot water. And the hoses will run underground into the house and it'll heat the house through a radiation system or a converter. And the way it works there is their boiler, the actual door is much wider and their box in the burner itself is much deeper, higher, wider. So they can burn big chunks or any size chunks. So boiler wood can be anywhere from, the 16-inch pieces or even smaller, it doesn't really matter. It can be your small little cut-off cookies and chunks you can throw into that. But a lot of people that do boiler wood will go with pieces that are much longer. So instead of 16 inches, they'll go 20, 24 inches, 22 inches. And I've even seen where people will do 3-foot long logs. So they do 3-foot pieces that are 36 inches, which is close to a meter. So they're throwing whole big long chunks into their boiler system in order to burn wood to heat. So it doesn't have to be a standard size for them. Because they're in most cases cutting it themselves or processing it themselves into bigger pieces. Now in other countries there are different measurements also for wood. The standard size in the United States here is a 16-inch piece because we don't use the metric system, so 16 inches is kind of a standard piece. It can vary a little bit over, a little bit under, but that's the standard. Now in other countries, and I've seen videos on this, where in Europe, certain European countries, Australia, New Zealand, over in the Asian countries, the Far East, the standard size pieces are much shorter. 10 inches to 12 inches is kind of a standard length that I've seen. So much smaller pieces, much smaller chunks. I believe that's just how they developed over the years and that's the sizes they use. So much different than what we use here in the States. Now, I did some research online, and I wrote it down so I would remember this. In some of the countries that use the metric system, the wood is sold by the steery, I believe. It's S-T-E-R-E, so steer or steery. Correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation, but it's either steer or steery. And that is 1 cubic meter, which equals 0.276 cords, so about 1/4 of a cord of wood for our measurement in the United States. And those pieces can vary anywhere from 33 to 50 centimeters. I got it off the internet, so it must be true because everything on the internet is true, as you know. So in a lot of undeveloped countries, what's interesting is that they don't have a piece measurement that they go by. They go by bundles. And the bundles are called faggots. Yes, that's what they're called. F-A-G-G-O-T. It's a faggot. And that can be a bundle that is 3 feet wide by 2 feet high and 6 to 8 feet long. And that's called a faggot. Now this measurement, according to the internet again, was developed right around 1477. So it's been around quite a while. And if you get a small or what's considered a short faggot, it's called a nicket. So there's that. So, and that basically is not, that's not your trunk wood. It's basically limb wood. So pieces that are, you know, the size of your wrist and even smaller. Maybe the size of your arm, that's about it. And they're usually bundled up and they're sold in markets for cooking on. Generally, not so much in your cold weather countries, your northern European countries. This is in your more undeveloped countries, Africa, Asia, where they don't need a lot of volume of wood, very small houses. They usually burn just for cooking for the most part. So that's other stuff I found on the internet. You can look it up too. It was kind of interesting to read. So we're going to load some wood now. So again, standard measurement. Full cord, 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet. One of those rows is called a face cord or a third of a cord. So basically like the size of a sheet of plywood, 4 feet high, 8 feet long. Just the face of it. Face cord. Just remember that. What you see from the side, not from the end. Face cord. Also a third of a cord, also a rick. R-I-C-K. That's it. Now we're loading wood. So now another real common question I get is how much wood will fit in a pickup? That's a good question, because it depends. Depends on if it's a 5-foot box, 6.5 foot box, 8-foot box. It also depends if you've got sideboards on your truck, you know, extensions that you put up on the sides of the bed of the truck so you can go up higher so you can get more wood in it. Also depends on what your truck can haul weight-wise. So it's not just the volume, it's the weight. If you throw wood in loosely into a 6.5 foot bed, which is what this is 6.5 foot from front to back. If you throw it in loosely, you can put in, and what will fit level is about a face cord or a third of a cord. And that's what this is, and that's what I'm gonna put in. Now, if you put that into a 8-foot box, obviously it's gonna be less. And if you stack it, it's going to be different too. Now, if you stack it, what I do is I stack from side to side, starting in the front of the bed. You get 3 rows plus about a half or maybe even a little less than that, a third or so of another row. And that will be a full cord. So 3 rows, if you get it just below the top of the bed, stacked and a little bit extra, or if you go a little bit higher, 3 rows is pretty much a face cord. So if you were to stack this completely full, you can get a half of a cord or 1.5 face cords or 1/3 and half of a 1/3. So this gets confusing, I know. It takes a while to get the hang of it, but that's what you can fit in here if you stack it tight. Now, if you were to put sideboards on the sides and you had an 8-foot box and you had a truck that was capable of hauling the weight, you could probably easily get a full cord, maybe even more, into the back of a truck. I've never tried, but I do know if you went higher, arched it, and had a full 8-foot box, yeah, you probably could get a full cord in there, but that would be a load, a big load. And you're probably gonna wanna have at least a 1-ton or bigger truck to do that. This is just a 3 or a half-ton truck. So I generally sell most of my customers that buy from me will buy either a full cord or a third of a cord or 2/3 of a cord or 2 face cords. Sometimes they'll buy 4 face cords because that's what I can haul in my trailer, which is a cord and a third. And then I have other customers that will buy 2 or 3 full cords because they're heating with it, and I just make multiple trips. So now we're gonna load some wood, finally gonna do it. So this wood has been here for almost a year now. It was about a year ago or so that I cut and split and stacked this. But all of this wood that's in this pile was cut from dead standing oak. So as you can see, there's no bark on it. And so it was probably halfway dry when I actually started the process with this wood, which was the cutting, the splitting, and the stacking. So a good portion of this pile was dry when I cut it and split it and stacked it. So then by stacking it in the open like this, with only the top covered, as you can see, I'm just gonna peel this back so you can kind of see what's underneath here because it's got some snow on it. And I covered just the top. I covered just the top to keep off the snow so I can do this with it when I go to sell it like I'm doing right now. So I can just kind of push the pile off, and then this will have very little snow on it. So as you can see, the pieces they're all cracked, and I've tested this with a moisture meter, so I know it's dry and ready to burn. And so because this is a measured pile, this face cord or third of a cord here, if you prefer, I can just throw it in loosely, and I don't have to stack it to know how much I have for volume in the truck. So now I'm going to do this fast. So there is a third of a cord, or a face cord if you prefer, of wood thrown in loosely. This is all oak, and as you can see, there's really no rhyme or reason for how I put it in there. It's just chucked in, and if I was to get the pieces that are sticking up kind of down into the cracks, it would be about level, maybe a little below level. So now we're going to go deliver it. Down the road we go. So do you burn wood for heat or for fun?
That's pretty garage. Yeah.
Oh,
I got an old pot belly.
Oh yeah? So do you usually get oak or just hardwood in general, or?
Yeah, first time I really got a hold of it.
I was trying to get it over farther. You don't have to carry it this far.
Yeah.
You have your garage insulated so it stays warm?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
Most of it. Still got a few wall areas that
I have some people that will buy five cords at a time, face cords at a time, then I use my dump trailer.
I see.
Or if they buy a full cord, which is 3 face cords. But with a pickup, just one face cord is pretty easy to throw in and haul around. Then we have to hook up the trailer and try to back in. And
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, when I saw that cut, split, seasoned, ready to burn,
yep.
that sold me.
I don't sell wood unless it's ready to burn. There's a lot of people.
That makes the customer happy.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of people that will cut a few trees down, they cut it up, and then they think they can sell it right away. which you can do, but the people
Yeah,
gotta
but
know.
then you gotta.
You gotta know it's gotta dry for a
Right.
bit. Yeah, and all the wood that I get, pretty much, I buy from a logger that I buy full truckloads, semi-loads.
Oh.
And he cuts down a lot of standing dead oak, which is what this is. So when I get it, like a year ago, it's already half dry.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when I split it down and cut it and stack it for a whole year, it's ready to burn.
Sure.
And I have a moisture meter. I actually test it
Yeah.
and find out how much moisture the wood holds you.
Yeah.
And once it gets below 20%, it's really good wood. Well, I just pulled away from my delivery. You saw me chucking wood there. Where I unloaded it was right in the front entrance of his garage, and that's where he's going to be using the wood. He has a wood stove in there he's going to be heating. And so a lot of times when I do deliveries, I usually try to get as close as I can to where they're going to be stacking it. So that's what I did. And that's a typical delivery this time of year. People get a third of a cord or a face cord for heating either, with a fireplace or for in their garage, stuff like that. The people that have bought large quantities are pretty much done now for the year. People that bought full cords or 3 or 4 full cords for heating, those people usually buy early. Now I'm getting people basically buying wood for a fireplace or for like a stove in their garage, things like that. So that's typically, how it goes. I back up, chuck it off, and then they stack it. And if they want me to stack it, I do charge extra for that. Most people don't really want it stacked. I only have a few customers that want me to stack the wood, and I do charge for it. So hopefully you learned a little bit today. I went over information that I knew and some stuff I looked up just to kind of cover all the bases of what volume of wood is, as far as face cords, full cords, bush cords, ricks, faggots, all that kind of stuff as far as how people measure wood. So hopefully you learned something. I learned a little bit because I did a little bit of research to find out exactly what everything was. And so that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Right now, you should do some poking of some buttons, the like, subscribe, that'd be awesome if you did. Send the video to a friend, if you let everybody else know what's going on here, they can have fun too, just like you. So I will see you tomorrow in the wood yard. And right now you should get out in the woods and you should do some cutting. Good night, Irene.